Hi, my name's Sophie and welcome to Sophie Knits Daily. On this channel I like to talk about all things knitting, spinning, yarn shops and lots of travel content. I'm currently travelling around in my VW Caddy camper van and at the moment I'm in Norway. In my last video, Knitting Across Norway, I showed you my journey from Oslo to Bergen and I'm going to pick up where I left off in that video. I'm going to show you my journey between Bergen and Trondheim and everything I get up to on the way. I'm a relatively new channel here on YouTube and I feel like it's taken me a little while to kind of find my feet in what videos feel most authentically me and what videos I enjoy making the most, and this kind of hybrid between knitting and travel content is what I'm really enjoying. So my hope for these videos is that I can show you everything I would normally talk about in a knitting podcast, but include lots of travel content and a bit more real-time information about how my projects are working up and how I feel about them and how they're wearing. And we'll start with where I am. I'm sure you've seen the beautiful view in the background. So this is the Stardalselva Valley in the Jostedalsbreen National Park. This national park is home to the Jostedalsbreen Glacier, which is the largest ice cap in mainland Europe. The glacier actually takes up half of the national park and is 60 kilometers long, so I plan on doing a few different hikes and viewpoints to get to see different views of the glacier. The viewpoint we're going to head to tomorrow looks amazing and you get quite close to the glacier, so I'm looking forward to that, but that's for another day. So since leaving Bergen a couple of days ago, we've actually got up to quite a lot. There's so many fjords along the west coast of Norway that you have to get car ferries between the fjords. They're just labelled on the map as roads, as if it's just kind of a connecting section of the road, and the roads that go round the ferries are so long, so everyone around here seems to just get the ferries. And it was a really easy and quite enjoyable experience. It didn't cost very much and the ferry took I think like 20 minutes to half an hour, and it just felt like we were getting a fairly cheap and enjoyable boat experience on a Norwegian fjord. So I tried to soak up as much of that boat experience as possible, standing out on the deck and enjoying the views. It's been really hot here over the past couple days. It's been around 30 degrees, which has been slightly annoying. We're trying to get to Norway as quick as possible to avoid the heat wave and be in a bit of cooler temperatures, but we haven't seemed to have managed that. The heat has travelled with us. So instead of looking for big hikes, we've been trying to find places to shelter from the sun and go for some cold dips. So one of my favourite swimming spots was on the Hestadfjorden, and this lake had a sandy beach attached to it, so it was fairly busy with the locals here enjoying the sandy beach, but it really did feel like we were at the beach, and if you kind of closed your eyes and didn't look at all of the mountains around you, you could kind of picture yourself on a beach. And possibly my favourite swimming spot of the whole trip so far was in Lake Nystølsvatnet. And this is the place that I filmed my last clip in the last video, so you've already seen a sneak peek of this place. This spot was so tranquil and peaceful, and the water was the clearest water I have ever swam in. I could see through the water all the way down to the bottom, and I could see everything that was around me and below me, so I didn't get squeamish at all about any fish being around me because I could see them come in. So I enjoyed swimming in this lake more than any other lake, and I felt like I could do some proper swims rather than just paddling, which was fun. Another reason I love this spot is because we had absolutely no service or internet here, so it was a perfect way to get a proper digital detox. And this was the spot that I actually discovered I could read and knit at the same time. It's not something I've ever really tried before, but I've been trying to get back into reading. So I set up my Kindle in front of me and I was knitting on a stockinette project, and I surprised myself that I could fairly easily knit and read at the same time, which is a life-changing event. I'm going to be reading so much more now because of that. The book I've been reading is called Breasts and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami, and it's a book about the complexities of female relationships, mostly the relationships of female family members, and it explores how each woman kind of grapples with their anxieties about their changing bodies. So it's a really interesting book to read. It's been translated from Japanese, and I do fear that some parts have kind of been lost in translation, but I'm still really enjoying the book and it's one that I'd recommend. We also made friends with some friendly sheep in this spot, and I showed you some clips in the last video, but I have some more of the cutest clips you've ever seen of these sheep, so I'll put a few more in. The sheep had these little bells so we could hear them come in, and someone made a great suggestion in my last video to add a little bell to my Aggie the sheep toy that I'm making from the Mouche and Friends book by Cinthia Vallet, and I think that is such a great idea. So a little bell is going to be something I'm looking out for when I next head to a yarn shop. And from that spot we moved here, so you're all caught up with everything we've been to since Bergen. In terms of knitting, today's the first day that I've been able to wear my Montpellier Top Light by November Knits, which I recently finished. It's just finished blocking, so I've been enjoying wearing it today. I showed you this as a work in progress on my last knitting podcast, so this is the first time that you and I are seeing it as a finished object. I knit this in Drops Belle in the colour 7, and it's a colour I really surprisingly love. It's like a dusty purple, kind of muted purple colour, and because of the fibre content of this yarn, the fibres take to the dye slightly differently, so there's a bit of a marl which I really like. It adds a bit of interest to a stockinette knit. The fibre content is 53% cotton, 33% viscose and 14% linen, which I'm sure many of you know. Drops Belle is a fairly common and popular summer yarn, and I think that's for good reason. I did really enjoy using this yarn, other than lots of knots in the balls of yarn, which I spoke about before, but it just felt nice to work with. It's really soft on my hands and it feels really soft now it's knitted up. This pattern was so easy to follow. It's definitely very much suited to a beginner. You cast on at the back and you work a huge rectangle until you do some shaping for the underarms. You then pick up the left and right shoulder, and the sides and the arms are straight, but you do some shaping around the collar, and then you knit down to join under the arms and you work in the round, and you do a section of ribbing at the bottom. So it's 1 by 1 rib on the hem, and you pick up the collar to do 1 by 1 rib there also. And I did an Italian bind off on both of my ribbing, and I had some comments that people's Italian bind off with Drops Belle can look quite messy, and I don't know why, but that just hasn't happened to me. I honestly feel like my Italian bind off is possibly the best Italian bind off that I've ever done, so I don't know why I can't get it to look this nice on wool, but somehow it's come out looking really nice on my Drops Belle, and I don't really know how to tell you how I did that. It just kind of turned out that way. I do my Italian bind off in 3 steps. So I knit one off and purl through a stitch that's on the needle, and then I purl one off and pull all the yarn through, and then I knit through the stitch that's on the needle and pull all the yarn through. So they're the 3 steps that I do, and I don't know if that's how I've got my Italian bind off looking so nice, but that's maybe something to do if you don't do your Italian bind off that way. And then in the pattern you do the armhole ribbing as you're working up kind of your main piece. You don't need to go back in and do the armholes afterwards, and the ribbed detail on the armhole continues down the side of the top, which I think looks really nice. I knit this exactly to pattern on 4mm needles, which is what's recommended, and I met gauge and I got the recommended ease, which is 10 centimeters in the size 3, and I really like the 10 centimeters of ease. I feel like ease is something that I really struggle to picture and kind of choose when looking at a pattern, choose what ease I think would look nice on my body. And I think if I want to make a relatively loose flowy summer top in the future, 10 centimeters positive ease is something that I'll try and aim for. I feel like it's enough ease that it's very breathable and a little bit flowy, but it's not too much ease that you've got lots of fabric which is kind of then a bit warm and weighing you down and a bit bulky. So I like 10 centimeters ease. So I think that's everything I have to say about the pattern and what I've been up to. As I said, I'm really excited to see these glaciers tomorrow, and I'm really excited to show you too. I have so much to catch you up on from the past few days. So the Bøyabreen Glacier in Fjærland was absolutely beautiful. The car park was really, really close to this glacier, so we only had to walk about 200 metres or so to see the glacier, which was really nice considering how hot it was. The glacier was really cool to be able to see up close. It sat in a bowl-shaped valley, which I found out later is called a cirque, which is caused by glacial erosion on the mountains. And there was also some really fast water running through the smaller glacier at the bottom, which was cool to see. I dipped my toes into the lake at the bottom of this glacier, and I was pretty shocked by how cold the water was. Kind of unsurprisingly now looking back on it, but the water was the coldest water I've ever felt. It made my feet feel numb and painful at the same time, which is hard to imagine, but exactly what happened. But wasn't quite enough to cool me down from the super hot weather that we had, so I went and grabbed an ice cold Fanta from the cafe that was next to the glacier, and they had a whole wall of windows so you could see right into the glacier, which would be amazing if the weather was really bad, but I suppose it shaded us from the sun a little bit. And I could have sat in this cafe for hours, but my travel budget didn't really accommodate for that, getting a big plate of food or anything there. We just had a drink and then headed off. So since it was sunny and really hot, I wanted to head somewhere where we could kind of have a bit of privacy, have some water to cool down, and just chill for a couple of days. I mean, I've done a lot of chilling on this holiday, but the sun really takes it out of me. So we ended up in a valley just north of Skei or Skye. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that place. The first night here felt really magical and peaceful. I was able to do some reading in the sun. I was dipping in the river to cool down, just relaxing. It was absolutely lovely. And when it cooled down enough in the evening, I was knitting on my Kai sweater by Second Knit, which I'll show you very soon. I'm excited to show you. And spinning with my Merino wool top that I bought from Hillesvåg recently. I've also been really obsessed with buttermint tea recently. I bought this jar of buttermint tea from Bird and Blend before leaving to come to Norway, and I wish I would have bought so much more of it because I'm getting through it so quickly. It tastes like Murray mints. If you've ever had a Murray mint before, it's like a caramelly, a minty taste. It's so nice. So I'll definitely be making one of them shortly after filming this. The second day here, however, was not so peaceful. We realised when we woke up in the morning that this was an area frequently roamed by cows, and the area that the cows like to cool off as well. So I ended up being trapped inside of the van for an hour or so whilst the cows kind of roamed freely about the van. They were really interested by our camping chairs and were probably quite confused as to why we were there as well. I'm a little bit scared of cows, particularly when they're in a big herd, so I was just leaving the cows to it, sitting in the van, trying not to think about the cows surrounding us and how hot I was. My boyfriend was a little more brave and managed to get a few clips to show you, but most of these clips were from him hanging out of the van and using the van as a bit of a shelter as well. The cows were actually blocking our path most of the time that we were there, so we couldn't actually get out. But once the cows had moved on, we very quickly left this spot and headed back to our favourite spot along the river in the Stardalselva Valley. I love this spot because we were just surrounded by other camper vans, so it felt really safe and everyone was just there kind of chilling and peaceful and cooking, and it was just really nice environment to be in. That's something that I found throughout the whole of Norway, is that there's so many camper vans around here. So yeah, we felt really accommodated here in the van. There's kind of water everywhere, bins everywhere, there's toilets. We're at a little site at the moment that has toilets, so yeah, really, really friendly. So yesterday we headed on a different walk in the Jostedalsbreen National Park to get a different view of the glaciers, and this walk was my absolute favourite walk so far on this trip. The views all around us were absolutely breathtaking. You were able to see so much of the glaciers, but also all of the other mountains around us were just beautiful. And what was super interesting is when we got to the peak of this walk, there were loads of mountain huts. The only way I can really describe them is, you know, beach huts on the beach where people put their kind of surfboards or paddleboards and things. This was that equivalent, but on a mountain. A local Norwegian woman at the bottom of the walk told us that these used to be farmers' huts that were used for cattle, but a lot of them have been renovated and they're now kind of tiny little tiny home cottages, and people use them to put their winter sport supplies like cross-country skis or ice skates and things. When we were up there, someone was actually in their little hut and was outside sunbathing, so I suppose they're used all year round. But having a look around them was really, really sweet. And I have no desire at the moment to have a house, but I have a very strong desire to have a little mountain hut because they are just so adorable. And now we're here near the Sunde. We stopped here because we wanted to drive a couple of hours towards the Rauma factory, which I hope to head to over the next couple of days. But we realised on the way here that there's a walk close to here that used to be an old postal route linking Bergen and Trondheim, and there looks to be some really cool views at the top of that walk. So we're going to head there tomorrow and put off going to Rauma for a couple of days. but that delay has meant that I've been able to finish, wash and block my Kai sweater. I really hope it's dry enough to show you, but I'll show you some footage of how I've had to wash and block this sweater on the road and in the van. I've used the river water. The river water here is so clean. It actually even says on the Norway kind of tourism website that you can drink the water from lots of rivers and streams, which I haven't quite gone as far as drinking the water, but I'm very happy to use the water to block my knits. And I was drying this outside, but it started to rain, so I had to make a kind of makeshift drying area over the front dash of the van, which I just thought was pretty funny and pretty realistic to how life in a van is, and such a small van. But I'll go and get my Kai sweater and hopefully it's dry enough for me to show you. So this is my Kai sweater by Second Knit. I used the yarn Mindful Freya in the colours Denim Melange and Sand Melange, which I picked up in Copenhagen last year. And I intended for these yarns to be held as a second strand with another yarn, kind of like to add to the weight of it, because the weight of this yarn is a lace weight. It's 50 grams to 350 meters. But when I saw this pattern by Second Knit on her Instagram, I just knew that this yarn had to be that pattern. I didn't intend for the kind of bluey green and the pinky beige to be together in like a striped pattern, but I'm really happy with the way that the colours look together. I think there's enough contrast with obviously the blue and the beige, but also the blue being kind of a cooler tone and the beige being a warmer tone provides a bit more contrast as well, and I really like the way that that looks. I said in my previous video, but I'm going to say it again here, this is one of my favourite yarns I have ever used. It is so soft to work with. I can't get over how soft it is for a yarn that's 100% wool, and not a merino wool, I don't think. But despite it being so soft, it's also really sticky and grippy, so it's really nice to work with. If you drop a stitch, it doesn't all just like fall back, and it feels really elastic and nice to work on my hands. So I just had a great experience working this up, and I'm definitely going to be looking out for the shop Self-Made on my travel around Scandinavia to see if I can try and find some more of this yarn, because I need some more in my stash. So for the pattern, I knitted up a size medium to get around 20 centimeters positive ease, which is what's recommended in the pattern. And I used 4.5mm needles, which is half a size up from what the pattern recommends of 4mm needles, but they're the needles that I met gauge on. The pattern for the most part is fairly well written and easy to understand. There was possibly a mistake in the pattern at one point, or I just kind of couldn't make sense of the pattern. I don't really know how to describe the construction of this pattern. It's not one that I've done before. It's kind of like a modified raglan. There is kind of raglan increases in it, but again I'm not entirely sure, so if you know then do let me know. But you start by casting on the back yoke, and you do increases in this section on the kind of back of the shoulder. I don't know if it's a European shoulder construction. Again, I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, you do increases to increase and shape the body and the shoulders, and you're doing those increases back and forth. And once you finish doing those increases over the back, you cast on stitches at the front to kind of join under the collar, and then you work in the round doing raglan increases. And this is the part where I couldn't really make much sense of the pattern, because you finish doing a round of increases where you're shaping the body and the neckline, and then it gives you the stitch count after you've kind of done those increases. And then for the next row, you're told to kind of cut your yarn, knit around and cast on for under the collar. But the stitch count it gives you for that step is increased by more than the backwards loop stitches that you've cast on. It seems like you're being asked to do kind of the raglan increases to get that number, but the raglan kind of increases don't really fit with that increase round. I'm not explaining it very well because obviously I don't want to give away too much of the pattern, but basically what I did was increase using the kind of increase rate from the previous step on that round, and then continue with a increase round, stockinette round, kind of as the pattern recommends. So I was able to kind of fudge it fairly easily, but I was a little bit confused. The other thing I found a little bit confusing in the pattern is that there's a lot of stitch markers going on because of all of the different areas of increases, and the stitch markers are given numbers, but sometimes in the instructions the numbers aren't in order, so you have to do an increase of stitch marker 5, then 6, then 1, then 2, and I was getting very confused as to kind of which stitch markers were pointing to which part of the pattern. So what I ended up doing was put in a different colour stitch marker for, say, stitch marker 1 was red, stitch marker 2 was yellow, stitch marker 3 was blue, and I was highlighting on my pattern in that colour so I could identify which stitch marker was which colour, and that made it so much easier. A positive to say about this pattern is I really like with this construction the way that the stripes look. They're really seamless across the body and the arms because of those kind of like raglan stitches, and I really like that seamless look. Something that really drew me to this pattern when I saw it on Instagram was the really big kind of block of a single colour at the collar and the kind of top of the chest, and that same big block of colour at the bottom. I think it was like a really cool take on stripes, and it wasn't kind of consistently sized stripes all the way along, which I really liked. But I didn't have enough yarn to meet the yarn requirements in the pattern, so my kind of annoyance with my final project here is nothing to do with the pattern, it's to do with me not having enough yarn. But my stripe at the very bottom is much smaller than the stripe recommended in the pattern. You're supposed to knit in stockinette the amount of rows for the stripe and then do a section of ribbing, but I just didn't have enough yarn for that. I've used every single last scrap of the blue yarn, and this is as long as I could possibly get the jumper. So my stripe at the bottom is a bit small. When I tried it on before blocking, I wasn't happy with how cropped it was. I'm not really a very cropped person. A lot of my trousers are kind of low rise, and I don't like anything too cropped to show my stomach or anything like that. So I'm excited to try it on post blocking and see what it looks like. But yeah, I was a little bit frustrated about that, but again, entirely my fault. Something that's not so much my fault, and is maybe a pattern thing, and something I would change in hindsight, is the stripes are fairly large. So when you're knitting the sleeves, it recommends that you finish the sleeve on your kind of main colour, the colour that you've knit the collar with, which for me was the blue. And at this blue stripe, my sleeve wasn't anywhere near long enough. It looked like a 3/4 length. So I then had to knit another beige stripe and then a blue stripe. But at the time that I came to the next blue stripe, my sleeve was getting almost too long. I really wanted to have the same look that was intended on the body, where the kind of bottom stripe is much longer, but that just didn't really work with the amount of rows she recommended in the pattern for my size for the stripes. So in hindsight, if I was to knit this again, I would probably kind of calculate how long I need my sleeve and then base the amount of rows per stripe off that, so I could end with a long section of the main colour rather than this kind of measly small section of blue at the bottom. But it's not too deep. It looks quite nice. I did a few rows of stockinette before doing the ribbing because I didn't want the ribbing to include any of the beige section and look kind of what it looks like on the inside, where you can see kind of a row of the beige on the inside. So it does look more seamless doing it that way. It's not something that will stop me from wearing the jumper, but just something that I would change if I was to knit this pattern again. So this isn't entirely dry yet, it's still slightly damp and it's making my legs a little wet, so I'm not going to be able to do a try-on right now and see how it fits and how I feel with it on, but I'll do that over the next couple of days and let you know how that goes. I finally made it to Trondheim. I have so much to catch up on from the last few days. I've cast on a few projects, I've finally given in and bought some yarn, and I've had one of the worst experiences that I've ever had in the van. But I'll update you on that shortly. I'll start with what I'm wearing. So I finally managed to get my Kai sweater dry, and this is the first time I'm wearing it actually. It's so soft on my skin. It's one of the softest jumpers that I've ever knit, and it feels like a really light and airy fabric. I really like how thin the fabric is, and it feels like a jumper that I could put on with any outfit at any time of the year, so I could layer it in the winter and I could also wear it on colder summer evenings. So yeah, the fabric is really lovely. Still though, I'm kind of concerned with how short it is. It definitely isn't cropped in most people's kind of sense of the word cropped, but it's a bit too cropped for me. I like stuff to be quite long and to reach my hips, and it doesn't quite reach my hips, and when I lift my arms up, you can definitely kind of see a bit of my stomach or the top that I'm wearing underneath. And it doesn't fit with all of my tops because I like stuff to be a bit longer. A lot of my tops reach my hips and you can kind of see my tops below this jumper. So I've had to kind of find tops that they can't be seen under this jumper, and I don't have a very big van wardrobe, so those tops are kind of few and far between. I think ideally I'd like to try and find some more of this yarn. I picked up this yarn in Copenhagen, but I know there's a few self-made shops around. I think there actually is one just outside Trondheim, so if I happen to come across a self-made shop, I'll pick up some more of this yarn and hope that the colour match is the same, because I'm definitely not going to get the same dye lot now. But in the meantime, I do think I'll be wearing this jumper. I really like the colours. I think it looks kind of cool and is a bit more trendy compared to some of my other jumpers. And this isn't particularly trendy compared to what most people consider trendy, but it's a bit more trendy for me. So yeah, I do like it. I think I'll get wear out of it, but I would definitely like to make it longer in the future if I can. So I'll start with what happened first from when I last spoke to you guys. We did end up going on that postal walk route, which ended up being my absolute favourite walk that we've done so far. I think I'm probably going to be saying that every time we go on a new walk, but this one's definitely up there. So the background on the walk is that it's Trondheim's postal route, and it was built as a response to a royal decree in 1785, I think it was, which wanted to establish a safe postal route between Bergen and Trondheim. The part of the route we did across Bøyabreen is considered to be the most beautiful part of the walk, and I definitely agree with that. It's not a postal route that's used anymore, I don't think, but there were some post boxes at the top of the mountain, so I'm not quite sure who has to trek up there to collect them. To get to the top of the mountain, you have to take a zigzag path, and it's built as a zigzag because the mountain here is so steep. Even each section of the zigzag was really steep, and I'm so grateful to whoever wrote in stones at each turn of the zigzag what kind of number turn we were on, because seeing the numbers going up was good motivation to get to the top. The view down the valley on this section was also really beautiful. You could see the density of the forest and the lakes and the road that we took to where we had parked the night before. But my absolute favourite view was at the top. When we first got to the top, there was no view at all, and we were in the middle of a really dense cloud. But I was determined to sit out the cloud, have some lunch, and hope for a view of the fjord, which actually came really quickly. The view of the fjord was absolutely incredible, and I think it's the first time that we'd seen a fjord view that was completely kind of undisturbed and uninterrupted by roads or anything. It wasn't really very accessible, and you could only probably see it from the top of the mountain that we were on, so it just felt really kind of peaceful and magical. The clouds also really made the experience. I thought it looked like the fjord was so hot it was steaming, and the clouds were kind of coming up as steam from the fjord. And seeing the clouds rolling over the top of the mountain we were on was something I'd never seen before. It just, magical is the only word for it. I also really appreciated the view even more because we were just seeing it in glimpses between the clouds, so it felt like a bit of a treat whenever we got to see the fjord. And there was one point where a boat was coming along the fjord and the clouds were perfectly framing the boat. It looked like the clouds were kind of doing it on purpose, and it just looked really cool. It was an amazing view. I could talk about this walk forever because I just had so much fun, but hopefully the little clips that I've grabbed for you kind of explains how beautiful it was. The next place we went was the Rauma factory shop, which I'd been looking forward to the moment we got into Norway, and it did not disappoint. Kind of like Hillesvåg, they had on display all of their different yarns, their bases, and all of the colours, and all of their yarns were 10% off in the factory shop, which is a fair deal but isn't really the deal I was looking for. The deal I was looking for was just kind of a bit further back in the shop, and they had a huge section of 70% off, or up to 70% off yarns, so I was just in my element. I did feel slightly overwhelmed with the amount of yarns that they had in this section and the amount of yarns that I was desperate for and really wanted, but I feel like I did quite well in not buying too much. I got 2 sweater quantities of yarn, which I'll talk you through. So firstly, I got 10 balls of Rauma's Puno yarn, and they had quite a lot of different colours of this yarn in their 70% off section, but some of the colours were kind of similar to colours that I used before in jumpers, and I have a lot of hand knit jumpers now, so if I'm going to knit something new, I want it to be different enough from my other jumpers that it kind of has a purpose in my wardrobe. And I've never knit something in this colour before, so this colour really intrigued me. I don't know if it has a colour name as such. It says 326. But if I had to describe this yarn, I'd say it's a kind of dusty, mauvey pink colour. There is a bit of variegation of the colour through the yarn. There's definitely some lighter and darker sections, which I really like. And the makeup of this yarn is 68% baby alpaca, 10% extra fine merino and 22% polyamide, and it's 110 meters to 50 grams. I think it's comparable to the Isaiah Soft and the Drops Air and those sorts of kind of blown yarns. I'm not sure if it is a chainette yarn. The alpaca in it is so fluffy and soft that it's really hard to see the kind of makeup of this yarn, but regardless, I'm going to use it in the same sort of way as those kind of blown chainette yarns. I have actually already cast this on because it's just so soft and so different from anything that I've knit with before in terms of colour and how soft it is that I wanted to cast it on straight away. The first ever jumper that I made that I actually wear is the Cloud Sweater by Petite Knit, and I remember having so much fun making that jumper, and I don't think it's just because it's the first jumper I ever made, but it's the jumper that I probably wear the most. I made it in a kind of light beigey colour with Drops Air and Drops Kid Silk, and whenever I put it on it just feels really cool and trendy, and it just goes with every outfit. I really love the style of it and how it looks on my body, so it's a jumper that I definitely wanted another one of, and one that I'm very excited to have in this colour. I haven't actually knit too much so far. I've just done the kind of back trapezoid section, I'm not sure if that's right, where you do the short rows, and I'm just working back and forth now to kind of make the length of the back yoke. But you can kind of see, I'll show a bit close up because I'm not really showing it very well, but you can kind of see the colour variation in this yarn, and I think it just looks really beautiful. It doesn't have the most stitch definition, but I think that's to be expected with such a kind of fluffy, fuzzy yarn, so I don't really mind that. And I'm holding this just single. The pattern recommends you hold a blown yarn with a mohair, but I thought finding a mohair for this would maybe take away from how beautiful the colour of this is, so I just wanted to hold it by itself, and it's a slightly bulkier like blown yarn than some of the other ones available, so it works well just by itself for the gauge, and I'm really happy with it. The other thing I bought from Rauma I didn't exactly need, but the price was just so insanely cheap that I thought I would kick myself for not getting it. I think 10 balls of this yarn came to £17, which is just insane. So I bought 10 balls of Rauma's 2-ply yarn, I think it's called, and it's 100% Norwegian wool, and it's 160 meters to 50 grams. It's in this kind of darker grey colour. It's a grey that's made up from a combination of kind of white and black yarns that have been spun together. So I really like the kind of depth of colour of this grey, and there seems to be some slightly maybe brown kind of flecks in it. It's not a tweed yarn, but it's just kind of the way that the colours have blended together in this 2-ply. They're really, really pretty. It's definitely slightly rustic, but nowhere near as rustic as some of the other yarns they had in there. They had some single spun yarns that felt really rustic and not like something I could wear on my skin particularly, but this yarn has that kind of grippiness and stickiness, and maybe feels a bit rustic on my skin, but I probably won't be holding this single anyway because of the weight of the yarn. I will probably be holding it with maybe a mohair or a baby alpaca, so that should soften it up. I don't have any plans for this yarn so far, but it's a yarn that I'll definitely be able to use at some point. It's in quite a kind of neutral colour, and it's a good weight to kind of hold with something else. So I'm hoping the perfect pattern will come to me. I did see yesterday on Instagram that Ozetta's put a picture up of the shoreline sweater, which I really like the look of. It's these kind of wavy cables that maybe mimic kind of waves and being at the beach, and I think that would be perfect for this yarn. So once that pattern comes out, I'll have a look and see if I can kind of meet the gauge with this yarn, but that's an idea that I have in mind. And the final thing that I bought from Rauma that isn't yarn is this tote bag. I absolutely love this tote bag. It was only just less than £3, I think, so again, really cheap. And I think it was just designed to be kind of a shopper for when you buy yarn rather than a specific kind of merch tote bag as such. But it's really good quality, it feels really nice, and I really like this bright orange colour. It's a perfect pop for a tote bag and kind of jazzes up your outfit but isn't too much. So yeah, I'm really happy with this. It's nice to have a little memento of my time there. So after Rauma, we headed to Eiksfjelldalene, which is this huge lake with big, craggy, rocky mountains surrounding it. And I don't actually have any footage of this, and I intended to get some footage the day after we kind of slept because we'd had such a busy day. But during the night, everything changed. It must have been midnight or maybe just past midnight. It had just got dark and we were watching some Netflix in the van, just about to go to sleep, and we heard this really weird sound outside. It kind of sounded like thunder. It was a bit of like rumbling, and normally when we hear sounds like that, we don't particularly want to open the van doors because you're not really sure what's going on around you. We can peek out the window, but nothing seemed to be happening. But the sound was so weird that we opened the doors and had a look round. And as soon as we opened the doors, the sound got so much louder. And the only way I can describe it is a combination between being in the middle of a thundercloud and fireworks going off at the same time. It was the most horrible sound and so loud. And we had a look around, and because it was so dark, it was difficult to see. But I turned to face the mountain, and there was this huge rock fall down the mountain, maybe 150, 200 meters from where we were. So right from the top to the very bottom of this super craggy mountain was this huge cloud of dust, and you could see things kind of falling and moving off the mountain, and in the middle there was sparks flying, I assume from where the rocks were hitting each other. It just looked so terrifying, and again the noise was so loud. It must have gone on for maybe just over a minute and a half, but felt like the longest minute of my life. And we weren't really sure what to do then because we felt so unsafe being in this valley. I was terrified that the rocks were going to continue falling and were going to hit us because we were so close to where this had happened. And I was also really scared that there would be a forest fire or something because there were sparks flying off. It had kind of rained maybe a day before, but yeah, there was all sorts of thoughts going around my mind. So we tried to drive away from where the rockfall had happened, and we came across a few cars and we warned them about what had just happened, and they continued on down the valley. And we were searching frantically on Google Maps for where we could go, and we realised the way that we were driving got to a dead end, and the only way out of this valley and away from the bottom of these craggy mountains was to go in the direction of where the rockfall happened, which I was pretty reluctant to do so, but we looked at the headlights of the cars that had just gone that we had warned, and they'd been able to get past where it happened. So we thought, we can't stay here, I'm terrified it's going to happen again. If it happens right on our heads when we're driving below it, then it's really, really unlucky, but we're just going to have to drive and get out of here. So we drove in the direction of where the rockfall had happened to get out of this valley, and we hit the part of the road where the rockfall had been. There wasn't any kind of debris or rocks on the road, but there was this huge, really gritty cloud of dust that we drove through. We had the windows down so we could hear if any of that noise happened again, and I could taste the grittiness of the dust and rock kind of on my tongue. It was awful. And what was really interesting was there was such a strong smell of fresh pine, like freshly cut trees. So all of the rocks must have knocked down lots of trees with it, which is something that kind of makes sense, but I hadn't really thought about until I could smell the trees. And luckily we were able to get through this section safely, and we continued driving, and we found a really nice safe section that was super flat and there was no mountains around us. And it took us a little while afterwards to get to sleep, but we did finally manage to get to sleep, which was good. So the next day, which was yesterday, I was still really shaken. I had such a horrible headache all day, probably from kind of the adrenaline and the stress of it. I can't kind of stress enough how close it was to the van. It felt so terrifying. It was literally like right in front of us. And this was a fairly kind of big area that we were parked in. There were a couple of other vans there. It wasn't an area that we knew was kind of that had active rockfall, and I still don't think it does from what I've googled. It's not like a known area for active rockfall, but these things just happen. The rocks are so kind of big and craggy and the landscape's always changing that it was just really unfortunate that we were there at that time. There hadn't been any particularly heavy rainfall and there's been no snow or ice, which is often what causes rockfall, so we're not entirely sure why it happened or kind of how we could prevent being in that sort of area next time. And I have read that tiny kind of earthquakes or earth tremors can cause rockfall, but I'm not sure if that's what happened. So understandably yesterday I wasn't feeling my best self. I wasn't feeling very well, and often in these times I look to knitting as something to kind of relax me and calm me down, and that's exactly what I did yesterday. So I wanted a project that I could kind of have to think a little bit about, so it was taking my mind off everything else that was going on, but was also easy enough that I could get into a bit of a rhythm with it. And the thing that I went for is the Mixed Rib Cami by Florence Miller. So this is how far I've got through my Mixed Rib Cami, just from yesterday and today, and I'm really liking the way that it's working up. I have the same sort of issues that I've seen on some other people's podcasts, where the section of stockinette at either end of the section where you do a purl row to go into the twisted rib section, that knit stitch is kind of slightly larger and looks a bit pulled. But I think in kind of the grand look of the entire Mixed Rib Cami, it doesn't look too kind of messy or unusual. There's so much kind of different ribbing going on that it kind of looks like it's part of the look of it. So I don't mind that section too much. The ribbing, I'm working back and forth at the moment because I'm working on the back section of the top, but it's really intuitive to know kind of what stitch to be doing. So fairly easy, but obviously you have to concentrate a bit more because it's ribbing and twisted rib. And the yarn I'm using is a Merino cotton blend by Camarosa. It's 70% merino and 30% cotton, so definitely kind of has the elasticity of the merino, but I would say feels to the touch more like cotton. It is slightly splitty like cotton is, and kind of has the dryness of cotton, so hopefully it will be very wearable in the summer and on hot days. And I really like the colour of this. It's a very slightly yellow toned white, which I think looks really nice, and actually looks really nice with these blue jeans, so maybe that's a way that I'll be styling it. So that and the cloud sweater are the projects I've been focusing on the most recently after finishing my Kai sweater. In terms of what I'm doing next is we're in Trondheim now. I'm not sure if I said that at the start of this segment, but we're in Trondheim. We're at a lake called Balkedammen, which is just outside of Trondheim, and after the kind of unfortunate events over the past few days with the rockfall, we felt like we need to treat ourselves, and I'm really looking forward to a little bit of luxury. So we've booked an Airbnb for a few days in Trondheim to just relax, enjoy the city, and kind of have a bit of peace. And I'm very much looking forward to a warm shower. I haven't felt warm water on my skin in far too long. So I think I'll be doing a little kind of vlog of what I get up to in Trondheim. I've been suggested a few yarn shops and kind of spinning mills around there, so I'm very excited to head that way. So I think I'm going to end this video here. Thank you so much for joining me in this video, and if you do enjoy seeing this kind of knitting podcast integrated with travel vlog style video, then do let me know. I really enjoy creating these videos, so I hope you enjoy watching them as much as I enjoy creating them. If you do enjoy, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. And I've recently set up a Patreon page, so if you would like to kind of donate any money to the channel, then that's a way that you can do that. There's absolutely no pressure there to donate, and I'm not going to be providing any additional content to Patreons. I want all of my content to be available for everyone on YouTube and available for everyone to see. But with the Patreon, it's just a way for people, if you are able to and enjoy the content and want to kind of support the ongoing production of these videos, to donate a bit of money there. I am really trying to kind of stay away from doing any sponsorships, particularly sponsorships from brands that I don't actually use myself and don't really know very well. And up until now, I've never done any sponsored content. So a way that I can kind of keep this channel going and the production of these videos going is with a bit of donation from you guys if you are able to. So again, no pressure there, but the page is there if you want to have a look. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.